Okay, good evening, students. Yeah, we're talking about the history of English literature, and in our last lecture, we had talked about the Romantic poet. We know that Romantic literature is kind of literature which made a long-lasting impact on the uh, thought process and specifically the development of the English literature of the period. But as we just move forward and see, we can check that this literature has come up with as in mm, with a change making spirit of the time, and as we have seen, uh, romantic literature is worked as an reaction against the rigid and the um, systematic, or what we can say, the one which was bind bound to the rule kind of a poetry, to the free words or the free feelings of the expressions. So, when we just go and try to find out, this was Romanticism is a literary and artistic movement started in reaction against this age of sensibility and its focus on reason and empirical thoughts. That was the thing I would like to uh, mention over here. And as we move forward and see, we can check out the role of romantic literature is more uh, liberal, or the one which associate or concern with the outer public world. um, and the depiction of the nature, as we have discussed, is one of the major factor. As we can see, we had seen that poetry is one of the important genre in this age. Poetry was one of the important genre in the age, where we can see that romantic poets like Wordsworth and Coleridge withdraw into the inner world and were less concerned with the outer public world, and we can found that they turned to the nature and devoted themselves to recording its beauty as a counterpart to the sordid ugliness of the industrial town. And the same thing we can find, it is reflected in the novels of the period. As we just go and try to see the major novelist of a romantic age, there were four major one. I would like to start with the Sir Walter Scott, Maria Edgeworth, Fanny Burney, Jane Austen are the several names, and their devotion with the literature, with the depiction of the contemporary society, their problems, was the one of the important uh, aspect of the period. Okay. Mm, Then we'll also move to the rise of the Gothic novels in the Romantic age. That is one of the important genre. We'll talk about it, but but first I would like to go with the major novelists of the Romantic age, and of course, the names I have taken right now, we're going to discuss about them, but we'll start with the so-called diva of the age, that is Jane Austen. Okay, the stuff is in front of you. So I would like to go for her. writings and her devotion for the writing. So she was an English novelist born in Stimson, Hampshire in 1775. She did not receive any formal education other than an abbey school read. Her novels gives us a view of middle class family in provincial town. Okay, so there's a word called uh, mm, Lancet Gentry novels. So she was known for his Landed Gentry novel. Means the novels associate with the uh, people away from the city. Specifically, novels deals with the farmer, landlord, rich people away from city. Early work of Jane Austen has been called as juvenile in three volumes 1787, 1793, and 1794. The History of England, that is period of Oliver Goldsmith's History of England, was written by Jane Austen. But as I told you, she is basically famous for her uh, Landed Gentry kind of novel. So we'll see how she has described the world around her, even though she was not got any formal education. Uh, she did not receive any formal education other than Abbey school, but she lived in the Romantic age. But she rejected the Romantic cult and was indifferent to Romantic literature. So that's the thing. But she is the lady which had impacted the literature a lot. And have to see, have to go with this one. Her novels gives us a view of middle class family in provincial town. Although she lived in the Romantic age, but she rejected the Romantic cult and was indifferent to Romantic literature. By 1796, she had written a novel called Eleanor and Marine in the form of a series of letters moduled on Richardson, but later it was rewritten in 1797 and became Sense and Sensibility. The novels which were published anonymously are Sense and Sensibility, Pride and Prejudice, Mansfield Park, Emma and Northanger Abbey. Most of the time question has been asked on the both set and net exam on Jane Austen, and she's the one who has depicted uh, all stuff in uh, the literature, and we can see that uh, the depiction of her thought process and a clear view of her surroundings was depicted in her novel. The only novel in which Austen's name was there is Persuasion, written in 1817. Northanger Abbey and Persuasion are the novel which were published posthumously in 1817. Austen began to write as early as 1787 for her own and her family amusement. Later, she compiled four copies of 29 of these early works into three bound notebooks, which is now referred as a juvenilia. Okay, you must have an idea. Uh, in 1793, she began and then abandoned a short play, later entitled Sir Charles Grandson or The Happy Man, a comedy in six acts, but she completed it in 1800. So this was a parody to Samuel Richardson's The History of Sir Charles Grandson, which I already had discussed. Between 1793 to 95, she wrote Lady Susan, a short epistolary novel. The persuasion was initially titled The Iliads. She probably died of tuberculosis. Tuberculosis was uh, the kind of disease at that time it didn't had in medicine. Her sister Cassandra was the closest friend to her. Love and Friendship is the dark satirical comedy by Jen. She said about Emma, a heroine whom no one but myself will much like. The incomplete works of Austen's are Lady Susan, The Watson, and Sanditon. Uh, we have several novels of her. Not going to discuss all of them, but we'll try to give you some glimpses of the some of her important novels, specifically her very famous one. We all have an idea that is Pride and Prejudice, but let's have a look in the some other ones also. So, Sense and Sensibility, a novel. It appeared in 1811 under the pseudonym A Lady. It is a work of romantic fiction, better known as a comedy of manners. Yeah, we can call it as a comedy of manners. It portrays the life and love of the Dashwood sisters, Eleanor and Maureen. Both of them find their private fate but resulted in an unhappy love story, but their parallel plot gives the demonstration of dual thesis. Sense in the book means good judgment and sensibility means sensitivity or emotionality. It includes total 50 chapters. A famous character of this novel is Mr. Henry Dashwood. Uh, when Dashwood dies, he left all his money to his first wife son, John Dashwood. His second wife and three daughters are left with no permanent home and a very little income. Mrs. Dashwood and her three daughters, Eleanor, Maureen, and Margaret, are invited to stay with their distant relations, the Middletons, at Barton Park. So this is basically the story of these three sisters, Eleanor, Marian, and Margaret. Eleanor was sad to leave her home at Northland because she was closely attached to Edward Ferrars, the brother-in-law of her half-brother John. At Barton Park, Eleanor and Maureen discover the retired officer Colonel Brandon and a bachelor John Willoughby. Willoughby has rescued Marian after she twists her ankle. Willoughby and Maureen flaunt their attachment to one another. Willoughby suddenly announces that he is departing for London, leaving Marian lovesick and miserable. Anne and Lucy are two recently discovered relation of Lady Middleton's mother, Mrs. Jennings, who arrives as a guest to Middleton. Lucy reveals that she had been in love with Edward Ferrars for last 1 year, with whom Eleanor was also in love. Thus, she is shocked. In volume second, Eleanor and Marianne visits London with Mrs. Jennings. Colonel Brandon informed Eleanor that in London everyone is talking about the marriage of Marine and Willoughby, while she has not told her attachment to her family. Rather, Marian was anxious to be reunited with Willoughby, but later she rejects him when she sees him at a party in the town, saying that he ever had a feeling for her. and this is how the story goes on. At the end, Mariner and Colonel Brandon get engaged. Uh, Eleanor and Edward Ferrars also come into the touch and get engaged. Okay. About Sense and Sensibility, a novel, very good novel, gives you the glimpses of the love and the misunderstanding. But even today, we know that this lady, uh, Jane Austen, is famous for her Pride and Prejudice. Most of the universities in the world where English literature getting taught can see that uh, they all have this involvement of Jane Austen and her work Pride and Prejudice. सगळ्यात जिथे जिथं मोस्ट ऑफ द ठिकाणी इंग्लिश लिटरेचर शिकवलं जातं तिथं आपण बघू की जेन ऑस्टिन ची ही जे वर्क आहे प्राईड अँड प्रेजुडिस हे शिकवलं जातं. Even in our masters, we had learned this Pride and Prejudice and given a presentation on it. Most of you might have also studied the same. Don't know, but when we just try to study Jane Austen and her works, we feel something familiar to us also. Okay, some of us can relate her working, her writing, and her thought process with our own story. Mm, talk about the Pride and Prejudice. This is again the story of four sisters. Okay, the original title of it is First Impression, but later it was changed. Genre of the novel is novel of manners, satire. We can call it as a satire, bitter satire, basically. Um, Specifically, the two main characters, Fanny Burney and Darcy, Elizabeth Bennet, and several others, but specifically, we'll talk about the characters also. So, it is a romantic novel by Jane Austen. Austen, published anonymously in 3 volumes in 1813. The novel opened with the line, and yes, you people, most of the time question has been asked on this first line, that is, it is truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of wife. Is the truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a life, in want of a wife, not life. It is written in the free indirect speech. The title Pride and Prejudice has been taken from the passage in Fanny Burney's popular 1782 novel Cecilia. Darcy says in the play, a lady's imagination is very rapid. It jumps from admiration to love, from love to matrimony. Elizabeth Bennet is the main character, who is second of the five daughters of gentlemen. Mr. Bennet is a bookish man. Mrs. Bennet is a woman lacking in social grace and concern with finding husband for her five daughters. ओके. आता मिसेस बॅनेट अशी एक बाई होती की तिला तिच्या 5 मुलींच्या लग्नाचं टेन्शन आलं होतं. अँड मोस्ट ऑफ अस हॅव एन आयडिया अबाउट दिस, की हे 7 लोकांचं कुटुंब राहत होतं, कसं तरी दिवस काढत होतं छान. आणि मग त्यांच्या इथं काही बॅचलरशिप झाले. आणि मग त्यातला हा डासी होता एक, तुझ्या मित्राकडे आला होता. मग तो परत त्याच्या इस्टेटमध्ये गेला. मग तिथं एक डान्सिंग बॉल असतात तिथे या सगळ्या गेल्या. ही मिसेस बॅनेट सगळ्या मुलींना घेऊन गेली, कारण की तिला असं वाटत होतं की यांचं कुठंतरी काहीतरी व्हावं बुवा. सो सेम हॅपन. द फाईव्ह डॉटर्स आर जेन बेनेट, Elizabeth Bennet, Mary, Kitty or Catherine, and Lydia. We can call Elizabeth Bennet as a protagonist of. I would say instead of protagonist, we can call her as a main lead character. The novel is set in rural England in the early 19th century, and it follows the Bennet family, which includes five very different sisters. Mrs. Bennet is anxious to see all her daughters married, especially as the modest family estate is to be inherited by William Collins when Mrs. Bennet dies. So, at a ball, the wealthy and newly arrived Charles Bingley takes an immediate interest in the eldest Bennet daughter, the beautiful and shy Jane. The encounter between his friends Darcy and Elizabeth is less coordinated. Although Austin shows them intimidated by each other, he reverts the convention of first impression, pride of rank and fortune, and prejudice against the social inferiority of Elizabeth's family, hold Darcy aloof, while Elizabeth is equally fired both by the pride of self-respect and by prejudice against Darcy's snobbery. Uh, the pompous Collins subsequently uh, arrives hoping to marry one of the Bennet sisters. Elizabeth, however, refused his offer of marriage, and he instead became engaged to her friend Charlotte Lucas. During this time, Elizabeth encounters the charming George Wickham, a military officer. There is a mutual attraction between the two, and he informs her that Darcy has denied him his inheritance. After Bingley abruptly departs from London, Elizabeth's dislike of Darcy increases as she becomes convinced that he is discouraging Bingley's relationship with Jane. Yeah, that is one of the major part of the novel. Darcy, however, has grown increasingly fond of Elizabeth, admiring her intelligence and vitality. While visiting the now married Charlotte, Elizabeth sees Darcy, who professes his love for her and proposes. A surprised Elizabeth refuses his offer, and when Darcy demands an explanation, she accuses him of breaking up Jane and Bingley. And Darcy subsequently writes Elizabeth a letter in which he explains that he separated the couple largely because he did not believe Jane returned Bingley's affection. He also disclosed that Wickham, after squandering his inheritance, tried to marry Darcy's then 15-year-old sister in an attempt to gain possession of her fortune. And with this revelation, Elizabeth begins to see Darcy in a new light. So after uh, this new light, we can find a climax in the story, and a story change in the total degree. Shortly thereafter, the youngest Bennet's sister Lydia eloped with Wickham. The news is met with great alarm by Elizabeth, since the scandalous affair, which is unlikely to end in marriage, could ruin the reputation of the other Bennet sisters. When she tells Darcy, he persuades Wickham to marry Lydia, offering him money. Again, the another angle of the man. Despite Darcy's attempt to keep his intervention a secret, Elizabeth learns of his actions at the encouragement of Darcy. Bingley subsequently returns and he and Jane become engaged. Finally, Darcy proposes again to Elizabeth, who this time accepts. And this is how this goes on. So, while talking about the Jane Austen, her keen observation of the contemporary society and uh, what I can call it wants, um, affection, mm, specifically. स्पेसिफिक शब्द नाही मला एक कळत आहे की आपण जेव्हा better to English when girls come into the age and looking for the partner, so their whole thinking, their whole thought process getting changed, and the same thing, the girl who looking to get married, how she feels, that the one thing which this person, this lady Jane Austen tried to capture in this novel, the relation of the Elizabeth and the Darcy is on the peak level, and that's makes all the difference which we can see in the works of the Jane Austen. So unlike her, Mansfield Park is another famous work. Not going to discuss a lot it. Emma Woodhouse, again one of the famous novel of her. Go and have a look into it. These are some important works which will help you a lot. But specifically this one, I would like to discuss, which we already discussed actually. Pride and Prejudice is one of the famous one, along with the Sense and Sensibility. Most of the time, sequence of the Jane Austen's novels has been asked uh, in the exam. So the first one is Sense and Sensibility, written in 1811. Then second one is Pride and Prejudice, written in 1813. The third one, Mansfield Park, 1814. Emma, 1815. Northanger Abbey, 1818. That was published posthumous. Persuasion, 1818, published in posthumous. Unfinished work, The Watson, written in 1804. Sanditon, written in 1817. The sequence of these novels you must have to keep in your mind while studying Jane Austen. Okay, hope you just get my point. Uh, we'll go with this person later. John Keats, his time frame is 1795 to 1821. He was an English romantic poet. He is regarded as the romantic poet of second generation, sorry, along with Shelley and Byron. He was born in uh, Newgate, London. He was a medical student at Guy's Hostel. Yeah, he wrote his first poem, that is an imitation of Spenser in 1814. He was inspired by Leigh Hunt and Byron. In 1816, Leigh Hunt agreed to publish his sonnet Solitude in his magazine The Examiner. And then we can see that is his friend Charles Cowder Clark described this day of publication of poetry as a red letter day. All the works of Keats were mostly written and published during the last 5 years of his life. The Three Young Poets is a collaborative work of Shelley, Keats, and Reynolds, published by Hunt. On first looking at Chapman's Homer, most of the time question has been asked in Net and said both exam. Is a sonnet by Keats altogether? He wrote 64 sonnets. John Keats is reputed for his Hellenic spirit. The word Hellenic spirit is the famous one. Beauty is truth, truth beauty. That is all ye know on earth and all we need to know. These are the ending line of the Ode on Gracious Urn. He died of tuberculosis. His tombstone reads, "Here lies one whose name was writ in the water." This question has been asked in a सेट एक्झाम. सेटमध्ये हा प्रश्न विचारला गेलाय, तुम्हाला खोटं वाटेल पण येस, देर इज अ क्वेश्चन. Shelley memorized kids in his poem Adonis. The year 1819 is called Annus Mirabilis because he wrote most of his important poem in this year. He fell in love with Fanny Brown, but she did not respond his love. He was one among the Cockney poets. Okay, Cockney School of Poetry. We all have an idea. He he was one of them. Matthew Arnold told about Keats that Keats is enchantingly and abundantly sensuous. He is more sensuous than other because he satisfies not one or two but all the five senses. In a letter entitled On Axioms and the, the Surprises of Poetry, letter to John Taylor, Keats wrote, I think poetry should surprise by a fine excess and not by singularity. It should strike the reader as a wording of his own highest thought and appear almost a remembrance. Major works of Keats: Odes of Keats, Ode to the Melancholy, Ode to Nightingale, Ode to Psyche, Ode on a Gracious Urn, Ode to Autumn, Ode to Indolence, O Solitude, Endymion. Most of us we have an idea. A thing of beauty is joy forever is the famous line from this poem. That is Endymion. Eve of Saint Agnes, La Belle Dame Sans Mercy. That is one of the famous ballad written in English literature in this period. Was by John Keats. Lamia, Isabella, Life, Letters, and Literary Remains of John Keats. King Stephen's Dramatic Fragments. On first looking into Chapman's Homer, total 64 sonnets written by Keats. Hyperion and other poems. Bright Star, Would I Were Steadfast as Thou Art. That is the film. Yeah, just have a look on this Endymion, a poetic romance written in 1818. One of the greatest masterpiece of the poetry. This is considered as the first long poem of Keats. So Endymion, this is the first long poem of Keats. It's based on Greek myths of Endymion, a shepherd loved by the moon goddesses Selene. The poem is in heroic couplets. Keats called this poem a test, a trial of his power of imagination and of his invention. The poem was dedicated to Thomas Chatterton. This poem was attacked by the Quarterly Review and Blackwood magazine. Actually, this was a great controversy we have seen at that time that the this Blackwood magazine and Quarterly Review targeted John Keats a lot, and then the whole mess happened. Opening line of this poem, that is, a thing of beauty is joy forever. Its love line, its loveliness increases, it will never pass into nothingness, but still will keep a bower quiet for us and asleep, full of sweet dreams and health and quiet breathing. It is dedicated to Thomas Chatterton and it has 4,000 lines. It is known for his Hellenic spirit. Yeah, I would like to talk about his concept of negative capability. Kids introduced the concept of negative capability in 1817. He describes it as when a man is capable of being in uncertainties, mysteries, and doubts without any irritable reaching after fact and a reason. He stated that great poets should have the willingness to remain in doubt or not to resolve conflicts or ambiguities. Some uncertainties were best left upon to imagination, and that the element of doubt and ambiguity added romanticism. Keats believed that Shakespeare possessed the quality of negative capability. Negative capability is a concept in which the author poet has to leave his origin and enter in his work as behaving as a character of it, as behaving. Negative capability is a concept in which the author poet has to leave his origin and enter in his work as behaving as a character of it. He has not to think what he is, he has to empathize his characters. He has to empathize his character. The next concept John Keats come up with, that is the ego egotistical sublime. This phrase was used by John Keats in a letter to Richard Woodhouse in 1818 to describe his versions of Wordsworth's distinctive genius, like his aloofness, his matter of factness, his austerity, and the self-control. Keats defined his own poetic identity as a this chameleon poet in a direct contrast to Wordsworth, whom he characterized as monumental and fixed. Ode to Nightingale, that is his another famous one. It is composed in 1819. He wrote it in collaboration with Charles Brown. He wrote about his composition as in the spring of 1819, a nightingale has built a nest near my house. It felt a continuous joy in her a song, that is Nightingale song. One morning, he took his chair from the breakfast table to a grass plot under a plum tree where he sat for 2 to 3 years. In that time, he wrote about the nightingale, what he perceived on piece of paper. Surrounded by the nightingale song, the speaker realizes that the idea of death seems richer than ever, and he longs to seize upon the midnight with no pen. By the end of the poem, poet realizes the nightingale is immortal. In this poem, Song of Nightingale is a symbol of art that outlasts mortal life. So, this poem, Song of Nightingale, we can find is a symbol of art that outlasts the mortal life. This poem that describes its journey into the negative capability. So, it describes the journey of kids in negative capability. A contrast is shown in the poem between the immortal song of Nightingale and the mortal man. It's called the Nightingale as a light winged nymph of the tree. Yeah, the next one we have is Ode to Autumn, another famous poem by him. But um, let's talk about his Ode on a Grecian Urn. This poem, we have such opening lines like, "Thou still unravished bride of whiteness, thou foster child of silence and slow time, Sylvan historian who can't thus express," and uh, he goes on, his imagination is fired by the perfect beauty of Greek culture. Another famous line that is, "Heard melodies are sweet, but those unheard are sweeter. Therefore, a soft pipes play on, not to the sensual ear, but more endeared pipe to the spiritualities of no tone." And the famous ending lines are, "When old age shall this generation waste, thou shalt remain in midst of other woe than ours, a friend to man, to whom thou sayest, beauty is truth, truth, beauty. That is all ye know on earth and all you need to know." So, beauty is truth and truth, beauty. That is the another stuff. It is Hyperion Ode was incomplete epic poem by Keats. Yeah, I would like to discuss this on first looking into Chapman's Homer. It is sonnet by Keats written in 1816. He was overwhelmed while going through the translation of Chapman's Homer's Iliad. This poem is a Petrarchan sonnet divided into an octave and a sestet with rhymes in ABBA, BBA, CPCD, CD, ABBA, ABBA, CD, CD. This one, the Chameleon poet, later to Woodhouse, was one of the famous later. Okay, the next one, Thomas Low Peacock, but uh, we'll talk about Thomas Low Peacock in our next lecture. He was born, actually, Thomas Low Peacock is famous for his The Four Ages of Poetry, which provoked Shelley's famous defense of poetry. Age of gold, age of silver, age of brass, and age of iron. These are for party.